Hey YouTube, welcome back. In retro gaming news, we have the Antstream Arcade actually landing on Xbox this week. If you're unfamiliar with the service, it's been on PC since May of 2019 after a Kickstarter campaign. This is really cool because the service is bringing over 1,300 titles to the Xbox. These 1,300 titles are coming to the Xbox from all over the gaming spectrum. We're looking at PC, we're looking at console, we're looking at arcade games, and it's something that a lot of retro enthusiasts are super excited about. Most of the titles are coming from the early 80s to about the early 90s, roughly 1982 to 1994. And it's neat because, again, you're going to see some classics like the Commodore 64, Super Nintendo, even the Genesis and Lynx are going to be on this thing. So most of the titles are coming from third-party devs. Looking at places like Midway, Namco, Konami, there are still some pretty heavy hitters in the lineup when it comes to this cloud-based service. We have the original version of Mortal Kombat, we have the infamously hard Star Wars games that you could actually play on the Nintendo or Super Nintendo back in the day, and I'm personally looking forward to some arcade favorites that I haven't been able to find in all of these years, Akari Warriors and Black Widow being two of them. Now, the reason this whole thing is so neat is that a lot of people don't have access to any of these kind of games. You can't necessarily go out and find any of the titles that are included on the list of over 1,300 that you have readily accessible ways of attaining. So it's really neat that Antstream is doing this whole thing because, again, a lot of folks out there otherwise wouldn't have been able to even experience these titles. It's actually been shown from the Video Game History Foundation that only 13% of any titles that were produced in North America before 2010 are actually accessible to anyone right now. There is no way you can find most of those other titles because it's so thin, and there's no real way to find either the hard copies of them or find a service that actually provides access to them. It's kind of insane to think about, and after seeing Sony and Nintendo both sunset some of their digital storefronts, they're just making it even harder for a lot of people to find a lot of these older games. Once again, if you want to get your hands on some of these things, it can be prohibitively expensive because the hard copies of all of them are so hard to find. Obviously, there's a collector's market, and a lot of people are either charging or paying exorbitant amounts of money to even get their hands on these things so that they can play them one time. Ultimately, it's nice to see someone picking up the slack where obviously Sony and Nintendo have, kind of dropped the ball, making it so that a newer generation of players can get their hands on some of these older classic games and actually see where some of their current favorites may have drawn inspiration from, or what they may even be based on, is a pretty damn cool thing in my estimation. And I'm really happy to see Antstream bringing it to more people. Again, with it being on PC, there was already a subset of people who could, use the service and have access to all these games. And now that people with Xbox have them, or have the ability rather to, engage with this cloud-based platform, it's just bringing all of these really neat games that I can remember as in my childhood to an even broader audience. One of the other really cool aspects about this whole thing is that they're providing a competitive experience with all of these older games. They have a challenge system, they have a way to play these games multiplayer, and I think it's really neat that all of these games, again, that I just know from my childhood, are going to be able to be experienced by a brand new set of people and in a better and cooler way in some cases, since you can actually, again, challenge other people that might have the service and just have a really good time with it. If you're wondering if Antstream is ever going to grow, the answer is yes. As time marches on, they do plan on adding a lot more games to their library, provided they can get the licensing and keep that licensing as time marches forward. With all the talk recently about what is going to happen with retro games, what is basically moral and what's not, with people emulating and other things like that, it's nice to see that at least something like this has popped up, and it seems that they're doing it the right way, as before I mentioned, when they're getting the licensing for all this stuff, and it seems like it's above board. It would just be a crying shame if we continue to see a lot of these retro games right off into the sunset without any kind of recognition, or without the ability of people to actually go back and play them. I find a lot of the older games still to be a lot of fun, maybe just in small bursts, but it's still neat to go back, and maybe it is just nostalgia talking, but getting my hands on those games and being able to experience a slice of my childhood is awesome, and I still know that a lot of new people would have a wonderful time with these games if they were able to play them. Long story short, if you're into older games, this is going to be an awesome ticket for you to get out there and try some for a relatively cheap price. Right now, they're looking at a monthly subscription. I also think that there's a way to do a yearly subscription. I think you can even get a lifetime subscription for X amount of dollars on many of the different platforms that it offers. Like I said, there's PC, there's Xbox. I think you can get them on Amazon Fire Sticks and some other platforms as well. But whatever the case may be, if you enjoy yourself some of the older games that this old man grew up with, Antstream is definitely going to be the thing for you, and I would definitely suggest you check it out if this is something you would love to at least, kick the tires on for a second. Okay, everyone, what is the future of Zelda? This is a big question these days, considering the last couple titles that have come out in the series have been nothing but open world. Now, if you're an old man like me, you know that Zelda has its roots in a very 2D linear style of gameplay that had very little else to do. You could wander around the map and do some things, but you would definitely become hard stuck in a lot of places, and you aren't really able to get out there and explore every corner of the world unless you had X, Y, or Z item. Now, it would seem a lot of the longtime players from way back in my day when I was, first playing The Legend of Zelda and installed Zelda 1, Zelda 2, and A Link to the Past for the SNES, it has definitely turned into a much different experience when it comes to Zelda. Again, with, Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, you're both looking at both of those being very big open world experiences. And it would seem that a lot of fans from even the games in the 90s and 2000s are starting to feel like Zelda may be deviating just a little bit too far from what it originally was. Now, we're not going to sit here and say that open world is a horrible thing, but it can also be a pretty exhausting experience. If you've ever played any other games like Assassin's Creed or even some of the newer, maybe even God of War or something like that, all of these are open world games, and you can just get buried in side quests, you can get lost, you can just completely lose track of what you're doing. And there are a lot of people out there who, well, that might be a fun experience from time to time. If you're getting it all the time, it becomes something that a lot of people are just like, can I just have a nice, easy to follow kind of experience right now? Because I don't want to get sidetracked. I just want to know where to go, what to do, and how to progress this thing. Now, The Legend of Zelda is a 37-year-old franchise. It's pretty cool that they're trying to plumb some new territory by doing an open world kind of thing with it. But it does beg the question, is all change good? Is it good that they're taking something that was definitely presented in one way for a very long time and slowly start to morph it into something else that might only be the flavor of the, I don't know, decade maybe? While the fandom may want to see a little bit more of a return to what Zelda was in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, last week actually saw IJ Onuma talk about the future of the franchise. And if you're one of the people that might want to see it go back a little bit more to its roots, you might want to brace yourself, because what he had to say isn't really inspiring. Now, I quote, "It's hard to say anything about the future. That said, thanks to earlier Zeldas, a game like Tears of the Kingdom now exists. This game was born from the idea we had in the past. We always try to make something that offers more than previous productions. In that respect, we are not really concerned with our old games anymore. We prefer to focus on the future." What do you think, everyone? Do you think that the Zeldas of old are a long dead thing? Because if IG is to be believed, it kind of seems that that is going to be the case. We may actually be seeing the end of what Zeldas once were. It might be turning into the Assassin's Creed of Nintendo, or the God of War of Nintendo, or the Horizon Zero Dawn of Nintendo, or any of these other open world experience games that you can actually find out there right now. So, do you feel like it's going to be nothing but open world Zelda from now on, or do you think they may actually listen to the fandom and get back to one of the things that helped them make it work out in the first place? Chaos! Pandemonium! An unmitigated disaster! The first patch for Diablo 4 is out, everyone, and what does that mean for the game and the player base? Well, if everyone is to be believed, it seems that everything is on fire and the game should just be uninstalled and everyone at Blizzard should go throw themselves into traffic. Now, the Diablo 1.10 patch for the first season of what they have going on to, make the game evolve has been released this last week, and it's clear to all the player base that it's nothing but nerfs and bad, and the game has completely shit the bed and will never be the same. Everyone has been declaring that it's nothing but nerfs for the players, nothing but buffs for the monsters, and that they are going to completely lose their experience when it comes to playing Diablo 4. Now, we're going to get into a few of the things that make the player base feel what they feel right now, but I hope everyone takes some solace in the fact that as of today, and I'm recording this on Friday, July the 21st, The people at Blizzard have had their Diablo, like whatever it is, Campfire chat. And Adam Fletcher, one of the biggest forward-facing people when it comes to Diablo 4, has said that there's never going to be a patch like this for Diablo again. So hopefully everyone can take just a little bit of time, step back, absorb the fact that maybe this was a patch that needed to happen, and maybe just take a second to listen why they feel like this may have been necessary. Okay, now, to be perfectly honest, if you take a look at the patch notes, it's not really that bad. I mean, sure, there's an experience issue that we're going to talk about here in a few. There's the issue of a lot of the classes not having the cooldown reduction on their abilities that they wanted. But after listening to what they said on this campside chat, fireside chat, whatever you want to call it, it kind of does make sense why they wanted to go back and maybe retool the game a little bit. Now then, looking at the patch notes, a lot of the different abilities on the different character classes actually did get buffed. If you take a look, a lot of the damage is up, crit chances are up, you know, a few different things to help make some of these classes maybe play a little bit more uniquely than what they have been so far since the initial release of the game. I was under the impression, and after watching this campside chat, this campfire chat, well, again, I always forget what the hell this thing's called, I was actually spot on. Even in my experience playing Diablo 4 up until this point, it's been pretty apparent that there's only been a handful of ways to really play each one of the character classes. Now, in a game like Diablo 4, this is a really bad thing. The entire point of games like this is to have a lot of build variation, be able to take the different classes and basically construct them in new and unique ways. And up until this point, the game hasn't really afforded the player base the chance to do that with the different classes. Essentially, what's happened is most of the classes have fallen into line of maybe 2, possibly 3 different kind of build paths that you can really follow and be effective as you make your way through the different world tiers and make progress in the game overall. Now, if you're a player of these kind of games, you know that there's always something that just ends up dominating the field over time. It doesn't matter if it's Path of Exile, it doesn't matter if it's the older Diablo games, and now Diablo 4, there will almost always be something that shines on each one of the classes that everyone kind of deviates towards as the meta. So, when you're looking at this entire thing, it's not really that bad, and I think all the Diablo people out there need to pump the brakes a little bit and kind of understand that this is only going to be better, hopefully anyway, as time moves on. Everything that I just said actually was backed up by Joe Pipora, one of the folks who sits on these campside chats and does these talks with the community to make sure they know exactly what their thought is on this. And he said that not all the builds that could be possible on the different classes are being represented by the meta. So has Blizzard done something really major and probably something that has definitely chapped the ass of all of the player base, or at least a fair amount of it? Sure. From the people I've talked to, from what I've seen online, from what I've read everywhere, there are a lot of folks who are very upset that they can't just power through anymore. It's not really easy mode. It's not something that they can just sit down and thoughtlessly play like they might want to. And while it does suck for those people like that, there are enough people out there that also want to actually have the ability to make different builds. They don't want to be pigeonholed. They don't want to just be doing the same thing over and over. And if a lot of the changes that Blizzard has put in on this patch are basically a big regression so that they can progress in a more, suitable fashion as time moves on, then I have to believe that they truly do have the best interest of the game's future in mind. Now, this isn't without a little bit of controversy either, because there are definitely a lot of rumblings, and rightfully so, when looking at the patch notes and even what they said on this campfire chat, that the experience issues that people are bringing up are actually a problem. So what are the experience issues? Well, it would seem that Blizzard decided to reduce the amount of enemies that are out in the world that people get experience from. They reduced the amount of elites that you would see. They reduced being able to go in and basically ride a friend's coattails if you went into a dungeon and your guy just sits at the beginning. That person runs out, kills all the stuff, and you just passively gain experience. Probably not a bad thing either, let's be 100% honest. What? So I do think that they have a lot of the best interest in mind still when they're doing this. However, it could open up a road for them in the future to start using their in-game shop for a few more nefarious things. Now, what could those nefarious things be? Gee, I don't know, maybe an XP buff? Even though when Diablo 4 was announced and they said there was going to be a shop in the game, they had always maintained it was going to be strictly cosmetic. So you can buy armor cosmetics, you can buy horse cosmetics, just, fashion statements. So while I would like to believe that Blizzard's going to stick to those guns and continue to only use their shop for cosmetics, I do wonder if this is a potential, again, avenue for them to use in the future to start dropping XP boosts over time. Now, what would that mean for the game as a whole? I don't know if it would be really well received by the player base, and I'm going to go ahead and fall on the side of it absolutely wouldn't. It definitely will do a lot of damage to their reputation and whether or not people are going to want to continue to play the game or even be invested in future Blizzard projects. It was a very well-known fear before Diablo 4 was released that the shop was a very scary thing for this very reason. More than a few diehard Diablo fans were definitely taking cues from Diablo Immortal, or Diablo Immoral, as some people like to call it over time, rightfully so, I think, that Blizzard will essentially utilize this to make more money and bleed their player base even more, because if they can get money out of people being in the game longer, driving them to a point of, man, this grind is getting to me, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna go ahead and pay for the XP boost. I can't imagine that they may not want that. All in all, games are a business, and we all know that if they can, they will continue to bleed us for money in the form of DLCs, in-game shops, almost anything to nickel and dime us out of more of our cash. Is that really a good thing? Probably not. Ultimately, when it comes to any of these kind of games, we all know that things can definitely go sideways very quickly. And if the corporations can, they, like I said, will continue to try and get more money out of the player base. I'm hoping and hoping and hoping that Blizzard isn't going to go this route, because it will essentially go against everything they ever stated before Diablo 4 came out. So, is the vitriol understandable right now from the player base? I kind of think it is, but I also think there might be a lot of overreaction going on with Diablo 4 as well right now with the patch notes. It was very clear after the first, preseason that they had before this first season of theirs came out, that there were deficiencies in the game. A lot of classes weren't getting their due when it came to certain builds. A lot of classes were super overpowered, and again, it was literally the only way to build them. And having this huge regression was more than likely necessary. However, the experience thing is a scary little bit of business, and again could set an unfortunately bad precedent as time moves forward. This is definitely one that we're going to keep an eye on as time moves on, and I would love to hear what you guys have to say, because I'm sure there's more than a few of you out there who've been playing Diablo 4 and have a very, very, very strong take when it comes to some of this stuff. Make sure that you put it down in the comments, because I would love to have more of a conversation about this with you all, and it could give me something to use the next time we actually touch on Diablo. Thanks again for coming out, everybody. I seriously hope everyone enjoyed all the news that we had to deliver on this one, whether it was Diablo or Antstream Arcade or the Zelda news. I really want to know what you guys are thinking. I really want to know what you guys are feeling about all this. So make sure that you like, comment, subscribe. Don't like it if you don't like it, whatever floats your boat. And make sure you guys pop by Twitch sometimes. We talk about a lot of this stuff on my Twitch channel, even when we're just playing games, or before we even start. We'll sit down, we'll have a huge conversation about things that are going on in the world, whether it's about video games or otherwise. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll definitely see you on the next one, everyone.